Okay. Hey, great big welcome, Eucatastrophe Fellowship. It is a joy to have John Eldredge with us today. John is a longtime author, great big Tolkien lover, and he's most recently written a book called All Things New. Phenomenal book. Tolkien quotes and concepts threaded throughout it. My mom, from down in Georgia, originally put me onto this book. And she said, John, you've got to read this. Eldredge quotes Tolkien all throughout it. And I ordered my own copy. Yeah, exactly. And I knew you were a Tolkien lover because of Epic. And of course, this is, this is a long time little classic now, which all my sons have read. This is a family favorite, kind of in our family, a primer on life in a sense. In terms of,
Wow.
yeah, it really is. It really is. My boy's own World and Life view has, in a great big way, in terms of the concept of story and narrative and redemptive thread, have been captured by your thoughts in there, John. But anyway, thank you so much for your willingness to join us here on Eucatastrophe for June's theme of hope and discovering hope.
Yes. Yes.
Which,
Hope. How
yeah,
beautiful.
and we all need some big doses of it right now, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really do. So I want to ask you right out of the gate. I just want to ask you this question. I love to ask everybody we have on Eucatastrophe. So, like, what first grabbed you about Tolkien? What was the start of your own love with Tolkien? What do you remember back to what grabbed you? What was your
Oh,
first
I
reading?
do.
Cool.
I do. I remember when I was in my teenage years. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and there was no guidance. There was no perspective, no interpretation of life, and I was hungry. And this is back in the drug movement in LA in the 70s and the hippie movement and all that going on. And there were a lot of us were really searching, really looking for hope,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for interpretation, for perspective. And I read the trilogy, and it absolutely grabbed me. I had no spiritual background. I did not at that time in my life have a faith that I do now. I was just a young man really looking for answers, and my background is in theater, so imagery and story and myth.
That had to just start to grab your heart.
Well, it was a gift. It was a gift at the time, and what's a beautiful part of the story is, so did my wife Stacy. Now we were
friends. Did you know each other yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were friends. We were simply friends in high school. We ran in a pretty rowdy crowd. But she did the same thing, unbeknownst to each other.
Independent of me.
We both plowed through the trilogy, and then we practically read it again every year.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
And it was this is a whole different story. But then a romance happened, and we fell in love, and we both came into a faith, and so then that actually coming into a Christian faith opened up an entire realm of appreciation. So we went back, and reread the trilogy, and
it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I think when any of us interact with Tolkien on an initial surface level, I think there's some sense of tugging on deep soul strings. And there's more there. You really do. I mean, I remember my first pass at it and realizing, wait a minute. And I didn't at that point completely know much about his spiritual background. I didn't know about his own journey much at all. I was just like so many people. I just was interacting with his, with the legendarium. And then as I'm watching, as I'm listening, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. There's subtext, and there's worldview, and there's just some deep threads there that,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. I think the first thing he gave me was meaning.
Mm.
His worldview is filled with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a great story being told.
Yeah.
And obviously the opening to the book Epic that I wrote, I quote Sam saying,
Right.
I wonder what sort of story we've fallen
What
into.
have we fallen into, Mr. Frodo? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my beginning
Yeah.
with Tolkien. We're talking 40 years ago.
Oh, that's been phenomenal. And then your own Baron and Luthwain love story out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yep. That's fantastic.
Yep.
So you get ready to do a book like All Things New, and we've already talked about it, that epic there, along with all kinds of other great literary quotes. Epic is rich with Tolkien quotes as well. But you get ready to do All Things New, and what ended up prompting you to realize, wait a minute, this needs to be infused with Tolkien material? Because I mean, it's fantastic. What sparked you to do that?
Thank you. So I've also been a therapist for 30 years, and there's some things we have to kind of lay out in our conversation here, which I know we concur, though we've never met. So it's great to meet you. Story is the language of the human heart. Story is how we make sense of the world. And, the province of therapy, people bring their stories to us as counselors, and we help them make sense of their story. So this is so basic to it that the screenwriter Robert McGee, who does all those very expensive screenwriting workshops,
right?
He's making a killing.
He's making a killing. Yeah.
He says people don't go to movies just for entertainment. They go to movies because stories help us interpret our lives. And so when I came to a book like All Things New, where I am trying to bring into the human imagination the concrete realities of the coming kingdom of God, of the hope that's promised in the message of Jesus, those have been so vague and wispy and ethereal and unhelpful for most people. That I knew that I had to ground it in story, and I had to ground it in the deep mythic imagery that captures the human heart. And if you're going to do that, you're going to go to a couple of sources.
Yeah, just a couple.
Really?
Right.
There's only a handful.
Right. At least that our current day can somehow grab hold of. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Tolkien, of course, would argue that he climbed on the shoulders of several others, but what can we climb? Whose shoulders can we climb on? And it's going to be Lewis, and it's going to be Tolkien, and one or two others. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, really good. So, in the mix of that kind of intentional story thread, intentional good foundation of the sacred myth, how do you see Tolkien advancing the kingdom agenda in his stories? How do you see that when we think about and so much of All Things New, you really emphasize that thread of our perspective on the kingdom, on the renewal of all things, the anticipation of restoration, but very much grounded in a very real earth, a very real new earth. And I think you just said a few moments ago that whole, we've turned it into this wispy, intangible. But how do you see Tolkien getting after that, the advancing the kingdom agenda?
Well, the thing that he does so brilliantly So you understand that one question is a 5-hour conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
That's why I asked it.
Okay. So I'm just going to try
because I know we don't have 5 hours. You've kindly given me one, so thank you.
We need to get that into a couple thoughts. And the couple thoughts I would offer is this. First off, because he puts suffering in a redemptive perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that for human beings is an enormous gift. That is an enormous good. The human race does not know what to do with its suffering. And so there's that, putting suffering in its place. In a perspective, a redemptive perspective. There is also the war of good and evil. That goodness is so vividly communicated in his work, and evil and its nature is so vividly, and the battle between the two. People need that. That is a kingdom of God message, totally lost to the postmodern moment. And so those two things, and then the hope beyond all hope. You know, that that the ache of your soul is telling you something very important about the restoration that's coming. And I mean, there's Sam. We're going to talk about a lot of different characters today, but for some reason, the first two I'm drawing on is Sam. But you know, they're lying on the they're lying on the landscape of Mordor, and he says, "Do you remember Strawberries and Cream, Mr. Frodo?" And like just that, like the ability to reach into the ache of the human heart for the beauty and the goodness of life as it was meant to be, and to bring that hope to us. I would say those three gifts, among many, would be part of his advancing a kingdom of God gift to the world.
To be able to tap into that's fantastic, John. To be able to tap into that longing. In a little bit, we'll talk about that whole thing of imagination's role in envisioning the kingdom, and then the ramifications for that, even in our everyday lives. But it seems to me that, I mean, what you're saying right there, that gift from Tolkien of tapping into the longings of our soul, and not only giving wispy words to that, but actually painting pictures, pulling us into the longing, pulling us into that hunger and thirst, pulling us into the emotions and the colors and the fabrics and the and the nature, the nature in and of itself. I mean, you know, to actually be able to transport us with just a few lines, to be able to transport you or me into Lothlorien. I mean, to be in Lothlorien and just, you know, you see the leaves, you see the color, you see, and that there's something about that then when I step out on a hike with my great big black dog Moosty and we go for a hike together, it enlivens then my sense of wonder.
It does.
That draw me up into a sense of wonder. So I love how you describe that right there, John. That's so good. So good.